We are. Okay, all right, we had to do it. Welcome to Happy Valley. I just want to make sure that we're awake this morning and find our Penn State fans in the audience. So good morning. We want to officially welcome you to the 2023 Pennsylvania Dairy Summit, hosted by the Professional Dairy Managers of Pennsylvania and the Center for Dairy Excellence. Let's give those two groups a big round of applause. Putting on a 2-day, almost 2.5-day educational event is no easy task, and we appreciate you all being here, and we appreciate their hard work. For those of you I didn't get the pleasure of meeting last year, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Amy Markle. I am the Director of Marketing for the Del Grosso family of companies. And you're like, well, what's a spaghetti sauce lady doing here at our Dairy Summit? I'm your official cat herder, or cow herder. I like that better. We're going to talk in the right terms, right? I'm just going to try to keep us on time, be the mistress of ceremonies. But a little bit of background to share with you. I am a proud dairy farmer's daughter. I have two angels in heaven, my mom and dad. But everything I've learned, I can take right back to my grassroots. I'm a former dairy maid, a former county princess, a member of the state royalty team. And from that, I say, once a princess, always a promoter. And from the bottom of my heart, I want you guys to do another round of applause. Thank you for what you do every day, making sure that we eat at least 3 times a day and have some of the best food ever. We want to thank everyone and the sponsors and the exhibitors supporting the conference and the presenters who led the morning breakout sessions. By a show of hands, how many were at those early morning breakout sessions? Taking away some great knowledge? That's a great way to start out the conference. So thank you for that. Now, just a couple housekeeping rules. How many of you have downloaded your app on your phone? All right. How many of you are scared because you don't even know what an app is? It's okay. Find the youngest person at your table, tell them you'll give them an extra cupcake or muffin today, and have them load it for you. It's a very, very simple process. Go to the App Store, look for YAP, search for the Pennsylvania Dairy Summit. Now, there's no T on it. You know, they ran out, don't have enough space for all the words and all the letters, but PA Dairy Semi. And you can also just take your phone and look at that awesome QR code. For those of you who are going, what is she talking about? That's that black squiggly thing. You can use your phone, take a picture, and I'll get you to the website as well. So please take advantage of that. And if you're old school and you're like, just give me a piece of paper with my schedule, the brown packets that you got at check-in will help you as well. So that will keep you on time and know where you need to be at the next stop. At this time, I would like to invite Tony Brubaker to come up and give an invocation to get our summit officially started. Tony is a dairy farmer from Lancaster County and is the chair of this year's Dairy Summit. He is also currently the chair of the Center for Dairy Excellence Board and a past president of PDMP. We all can use a little help these days, all the prayers we can get, so please help us get started.
Right. Thanks, Amy. And as we gather together, there's just, this is such a privilege for us to be able to gather together and have these kind of opportunities to learn, to grow, to see old friends, to make new friends. So let's just start by giving thanks. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day that you've given to us. We thank you for bringing us all safely here and ask that you give those that are still traveling safety. Lord, we ask your blessing on the time together, on the knowledge that we're going to learn, on the relationships we're going to build. We just would pray that it would be all to your honor and glory. And we pray this all in your precious name. Amen.
Thank you, Tony. We're going to kick off this morning. Any of you have any stubborn people in your lives? It's okay, you can answer it, unless your husband or wife is sitting right beside you, then maybe you should just wink. We've got a great way to kick off this morning's summit. Andy Junkin is a nationally respected author for his work in farm transition and communications. Andy's parents got divorced after his father bought a manure spreader. And he's been turning cruddy situations around ever since. Over the past decade, he has developed a completely different approach to farm management, which looks at radically improving how farm families make their decisions together. This all starts with the stubborn. He helps farm families stop being stubborn with each other and helps each farmer to become stubborn at turning bad habits into good habits, to be a partner and friend to anyone that they would want to work with. Farm, family succession, and farm debt can always be easily solved once you fix the stubborn. He's originally from Bobcaygeon, Ontario, Canada. He married a good old farm girl from Michigan, his wife Bernadette, and they now currently reside in eastern Iowa with their 3 awesome sons under the age of 5. We've got Huckleberry, Sam Colt, and Scout. So the man's going to know a little bit more about stubborn as the years go on. Please make welcome, if you will, to the stage, Mr. Andy Junkin.
Thanks. Appreciate that. My question, can everybody hear me all right? My name's Andy Junkin, and I help stubborn farmers work better together. I'm a 7th generation farm boy from a little town called Bobcaygeon, Ontario, Canada. All my friends growing up call me Cajun because there's never been a farm kid more hell-bent to go home and carry on a 7th-generation tradition. The first white man killed in our county was actually my ancestor back in 1832. He died clearing the land. I always thought it was so that I could have a right to farm. I found out the hard way, nobody has a right to farm, it's a privilege. Less than 12% of farmers are able to pass over grandma's farm to the grandchildren. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them. What caused my family to be successful for 7 generations in farming that stony ground in Bobcaygeon is the fact that we were stubborn. What caused my family to fall apart is the fact that we were stubborn with each other. And I'm hell-bent to turn the word stubborn from a bad thing to a good thing for farm families. I saved farms in 22 states and 5 Canadian provinces and developed a whole different approach to farm management and farm succession planning. But the first thing we got to ask is identify the root issue that nobody's ever identified. What is the biggest change we've had in technology in farming over the last 50 years? Come on, guys. 25 years ago, if you told me I had a choice between getting a colonoscopy or getting up in front of people, I would have picked the colonoscopy. So tell me, guys, what is the biggest change we've had in technology in farming over the last 50 years?
Bulk tank.
Say it again?
Bulk tank.
Bulk tank? What else? That's a good one, actually. What else, guys? Computers? What else? Cell phones? I think you guys are all right, but I'm here to give you a different perspective. In my perspective, the biggest change we've had in technology in farming in the last 50 years is the fact that fewer farmers are dropping dead of heart attacks at the age of 65 than back in 1965. Modern health sciences is a game changer in a way we haven't really thought about. Now, for the purpose of today's presentation, I'm not going to talk about how Viagra has impacted succession planning. But the thing is that you think about it, back in the 1960s, when Dad was 60 and he had bad hips, he don't go in and get hip surgery. Well, actually he wouldn't. There wouldn't be the option, right? But nowadays when Dad hits 60 and he's got bad hips, he goes in for hip surgery, right? And he's farming until his 80s or 90s. And if you want to farm till you're 92, and then you want to tell the neighbors that you're semi-retired, you're my kind of guy, I don't want to make that happen, right? But the problem we have is instead of there being 1 generation farming at a time, we got 3 or 4 generations farming together, right? And it doesn't make sense every 25 years to be splitting up the capital between siblings and cousins, because you got to keep it all together in order for this technology, in order to have the economies of scale to be able to farm together. So suddenly we got a situation where we've got 2, 3 siblings farming together, 2, 3, 4 generations farming together. We got a situation where it's what? Multiple people making decisions together, right? Everybody's fighting over who's the boss. You heard the term too many chiefs? What? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? And we all laugh about it. We make fun of the neighbors all the time. But it ain't no joke, right? Because if you think about it, it's a huge problem in agriculture nobody's ever recognized. But because you think about it, How many times you try to make decisions on the farm, and it's just awkward, or sometimes the decisions don't get made, and money slipping between the cracks because of it. And more importantly, on the days that you're actually getting along, this is something folks don't realize. You have your area of responsibility, your partners have their area of responsibilities. You see something going wrong in your partner's area of responsibility, but you don't say anything because you're getting along that day and you don't want to upset the apple cart, right? I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But we haven't thought about the decision to not make a decision is a decision in itself. And money slipping between the cracks because of it. And 30 years ago, that was fine and dandy. But if you want to be farming 30 years from now, the margins in the dairy industry are so razor tight. There is zero room for error. Right? And, you know, I believe this to be true. On most family farms, miscommunication and egos is affecting the farm's bottom line more than the markets and weather altogether. Amen? I believe this to be true also. You hear a lot of folks blaming the markets and blaming the weather for the skyrocketing mental health crisis in agriculture. But the truth is, if every morning, every day, you're butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, if every day your family isn't your rock solid but actually your quicksand, that's what's causing the skyrocketing mental health. And the white elephant in the room, most family farms, is succession planning, right? 77% of farms do not have a succession plan. Now, by the time the sons and daughters are in the 30s or 40s, there has been a succession planner on that farm, usually 2 or 3. Well, what happens is 77% of the time, that succession planner gets off the farm and says, that family's too damn stubborn to make decisions together, right? And stubborn is the root issue. Like I said, what caused my family to be successful for 7 generations is the fact that we're stubborn, right? What caused my family to fall apart is the fact that we're stubborn. And I'm hell-bent to turn the word stubborn from a bad thing to a good thing. And I've been doing this for a while now. I've been doing this over 15 years. Back in 2010, I started doing this, and I've saved farms in 22 states and 5 Canadian provinces. But I started off as a mediator. And my life goal is to get rid of the need for a mediator altogether. You see, there was a day, I got a reputation. I was the guy that got called in after there had been 2 or 3 mediators out there. I've written for Progressive Dairyman for over a decade. And I got a call from, I kept on getting called to the situations that other mediators couldn't handle. And there was a day, and initially I thought that I was doing a great job. I kept on getting called back to these farms. And then I started realizing that I had fixed the superficial issues, but I hadn't solved the root issues. And I got a lot of my training in conflict management actually from marriage counseling. But what I found to be funny, well, not really funny at all, is I came to realize that over half the people that go for marriage counseling get divorced within 5 years. And the truth is, when I see farm families, you know, a lot of times they weren't calling me out to actually solve the root issues. They were just calling for somebody to give them permission to get divorced. And that was a situation, and you have to understand that I don't accept that because I know what it's like not to get together with your family for Christmas. I know what it's like to not be able to wake up and milk your own cows, and to be farming and milking somebody else's cows 1,000 miles away from home. And there was this moment over a decade ago where I was sitting there at the kitchen table, and it was going down. And basically there was 2 brothers in a partnership, and they're near their 40s. And 10 years before, they were the best of friends. And then their dad died at 7 years before. And basically for 7 years, they were constantly butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. And, you know, this was a good Christian farm family that all of you guys would respect. The one guy was on a dairy board, the other guy was on a church board. This is a good Christian farm family that was well respected in the community. But they were being anything but Christian to each other on that kitchen table. And Grandma, she was sitting at the end of the kitchen table and she was just crying. And they didn't have me out to sort out their family disputes. They had me to get Grandma to be on their side so Grandma would have Christmas with them. And they were saying things to each other that Christmas wasn't going to happen that year. And the two sister-in-laws were saying things to each other that just couldn't be taken back. You know, the thing was is that the two girls were actually best friends in high school. The reason that they were all in the same kitchen was one brother picked up the other bridesmaid at the wedding, right? Not that that would ever happen. But there was a kid, and he was 16 years of age. And I couldn't, usually I'm really in the room, but for a moment there I was outside the room and just couldn't take my eyes off this kid outside the kitchen window. And I had met him a couple hours before. He was 16 years of age and he was leading a 4-H calf. And his mom's biggest complaint was that the boy would get up at 4 o'clock every morning and go milk cows, and she couldn't always get him to take off his work clothes to go to school. He liked going to school with his manure on his boots, right? And his dad tried to disagree with the son, but you could see Dad and Uncle were pretty proud of that boy. You know, if that was his biggest sin, I mean, boy milked cows 4 o'clock every morning, couldn't wait to get off the school bus, couldn't wait to go out to the barn. He lived to be a farmer. He represented everything that we come to respect about a young kid growing up in the farm. And he was leading his 4-H calf, and the calf was being stubborn. And the situation in the room was everybody was pointing fingers at each other, and everybody had 3 fingers pointing back at them. I thought how ironic is that everybody in this kitchen's stubborn. Right? I thought how ironic is it that the calf and the farm is bringing out the best in this kid, but it's bringing out the worst in the adults in the room. What's 4-H about? Guys, come on. Remember, I'm not much of a public speaker here. Tell me, what is 4-H about? Learning responsibility. What else is it about? Leadership. What else is it about? Say it again. Unity. I think those are all true. But I think it's also about self-improvement. And here we expect our kids and teenagers for the farm to be an environment that brings out the best in the kid, for them to self-improve. Yet everybody in that room was pointing fingers at each other, and there was mistakes that they all had made in how their production responsibilities on the farm. There's mistakes that they had working together. There's mistakes that they had that some days they weren't their best version of themselves. And yet when somebody brought something up, they would shift blame onto somebody else and change the topic. Right? They were being stubborn with each other in a bad way. And this was a good Christian farm family. They were actually Dutch Reform. And they had a Bible sitting out on a stand. And it was turned to Matthew 7:5. And the words were written in red, and the words of Jesus. And it said, does anybody know what Matthew 7:5 knows? It says? You got it. Say it again.
It's the one about the plank and the piece of dirt in your eye.
You got it. So do not take the speck of dust out of your brother's eye until you've taken the plank out of your own. Now, I don't care if you're Protestant, Catholic, or you're an atheist who believes Elvis is still alive. You know, those are words that can transform any farm. And that's completely changed my perspective on how we should approach things. We got to stop being stubborn with each other. And we got to start being stubborn at the habits that make a farm and a farm family successful. And, you know, I think I've developed a whole different approach to farm management and farm succession planning because of that. Now, about 5 years ago, you know, my question is not getting farm families to point blame at each other, but to get everybody to adapt a few good habits that dictate how the farm family works together from good to great. Now, instead of talking about what I do, I'd rather just you guys leave the room with actually getting something you can actually take home and do. Okay? So my question is But let's start off with talking about one simple thing. And what I want to talk to you about today is how do you get a farm family to be on the same page as to the values that made the farm successful and what's got to change in order for the farm to be successful in the future. Now, how many people here have people who are their mother tongue is Spanish work for them? Everybody stand up that has somebody that works for them that speaks Spanish. Everybody stand up. Okay. So, there's some people that can speak Spanish really good, can have really good conversations, talk about family, and then there's some people that can barely speak any English, any Spanish to that employee. So if you can barely speak, you can barely get by, barely communicate with your employee, you're like on a 1 out of 10. And if you speak perfect English, perfect Spanish, you're a 10 out of 10. So who here is about a 3 out of 10? Sit down, okay? Who here is about a 5 out of 10? Who here is about a 9 out of 10? Congratulations. And I think, the thing is I think it's really important to be able to communicate effectively. But the thing, 15 years ago, I thought I'd be on the farm 2-3 times, and I'd be able to get, the Tower of Babel. I'm a Christian, and you have to forgive me, but whether you believe that in the Bible is the Word of God, as I do, or you believe it's a story tale, it doesn't matter. Does anybody know what the Tower of Babel is? It's Genesis 11. And basically what happened was that mankind got together and they built a big tower. And they got so arrogant that they said, there's nothing we can't do. We don't need God. We can do this all together. We don't need God. And God got mad and he struck down the tower. And then he cursed mankind with speaking different languages. And as a result, we have problems communicating. Right? Sometimes when you're speaking to your partner, it's like he's speaking Portuguese and you're speaking French. Right? And I thought 15 years ago, as a mediator, I'll be able to get the family all speaking the same language, just like that. The reality is that for some people, communicating is easy. For the majority of us, it's really tough. Especially when the things that really matter to us the most and with people that matter to us the most. We have the hardest time telling what we're thinking. Right? So the question is, how do you get, in a farm family situation, how do you get somebody, I thought 10 years ago that we could improve communication. I've come to the terms, does anybody have Spanish, taking a course like Spanish for farmers? Right? If I can get a farm family speaking 10 simple terms, so you know how you speak Spanish to your employees, and you have 10 phrases, and they understand what you mean, you understand what you mean, and can get the job done, I think that's what we need for farm families. Right? And so there was a situation where there was a farmer, and he called me up. He was a chicken farmer in Nevada. He had a niche business where he shipped chickens into California in the backyards. And basically he had a hatchery that was putting out 2 million birds. And he called me up. It was 10:30 at night. It was pretty obvious that he had a few drinks. And he said to me, I've got a difficult decision to make. I've got to decide whether to fire my employee, who's been with me for 13 years, is my right-hand man, and he's worth his weight in gold, or to fire my son, who's only been with me for 2 years, and he's just kind of useless. Right? And what he kept on saying was, I kept on telling my son that you earn your respect of the employees, but he's just not getting it. And what had happened was that the kid went to college. He went to an Ivy League college, and he went to take corporate finance. Everybody thought he was never going to farm. And in his final year, he took a course, and the course they did a business plan with the farm. It was all theory. And father and son, who really never spoke that often, were on the phone with each other every day. And the kid had 5 jobs in New York that were really good paying jobs when he graduated. And he said, Dad, I've just really enjoyed being on the phone with you about this business project. I'd like to actually go home and make this happen. And the dad was just elated. And so they built a $2 million expansion of their chicken hatchery, right? And in that expansion, they basically had an office that was air conditioned, and it had a one-way glass window that you could only see out, not in. And basically the father, he walked out of that hatchery and he said, "It's all yours." And so basically the son went along, and basically what happened was the father had 12 employees, and he had always worked alongside the employees, and he was always the hardest worker there. He was in his 58, and it was hard for these guys who were in the 30s to keep up with him. The son had a totally different style of management. Basically, he wrote up a bunch of protocols, and he'd sit up in the office and look down with his coffee, and he'd call the employees up to ream them out if they didn't follow the protocols. And the employees started calling the boy the frat boy, right? And they grew to resent him. And there was a day that the frat boy was always, not always the first one to work. And there was one day he was 27 minutes late. They were supposed to start a hatch at 4 o'clock in the morning. Son showed up at 4:27, and the employees had been sitting there for 27 minutes waiting for their boss to show up to work. And it was pretty obvious that he had been drinking the night before. And he walked in, basically turned on the lights, went straight up to the office. Come noon, I don't know if you've ever been in a hatch, it was July. And it was hot. It was just really hot. And the foreman went up to grab a piece of paperwork from the office, and he see this frat boy watching YouTube videos, and he was actually asleep in his office chair. And the employee just snapped and kicked the boy's butt. The father said to me, "Who should I fire? Who would you fire? Who would you fire? Speak out loud. Tell me what you think, guys." The frat boy, right? Well, I flew out there, and there had to be a third solution than just, because family Christmas would be ugly, right? And so I flew out there, and I basically put a sheet of paper in the front of the boy, and he complained about how his dad didn't have his back, how the employees wouldn't listen to him, and then how the employees didn't respect him. And I got the son to write respect on that sheet of paper. And then I got him to talk for 20 minutes. And he kept on complaining about all the things his dad was doing wrong, how the employees were calling his dad instead of him, how they didn't have respect for him. And then I got him talking about why the employees respected dad, they didn't respect him. And we got into talk about how his dad earned the respect. And I got him talking to the point that I got him to write down on that sheet of paper, "You got to earn your respect daily." He walked out of that meeting, and he went to the tattoo parlor, and he got on his wrist, "Earn respect daily." That was in 2012. They were at 2 million birds that day. They are now they've done 2 expansions, and they're at 11 million birds. You've got to take what made your farm successful and make sure that the successors understand that, and it becomes part of who they are before we start talking about the transfer of assets, right? So my question to you folks is, what made your farm successful that you're concerned about the next generation is not getting? Or it might be something that your farm has grown so much that you used to have coffee together, for instance, and you don't get together for coffee anymore. And as a result, communication's broken down. So you all have books in front of you, right? So basically on page 106, basically what I want you guys to do is actually go home with actually some thoughts, just not warm fuzzy feelings. I want you to actually go home with an idea that you can bring home to the farm. So basically on page 106, I'm asking you, what are 3 to 5 things that made your farm successful that's got to continue for the next generation? So I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, and there's about 10 pages after. We're at 50 values that other farm families have identified as being what made their farm successful in the past that they've got to continue for the future. I want you to go through and pick out 3 to 5. And we'll spend 5 minutes doing, let you be, and just think for yourself, okay?
We're good. And I started the timer so we know when we hit the 5.
So that's 13 minutes?
No. I just going the other way.
Okay, how many minutes do we have left?
You're done at 10:15. Okay. Okay. Yep. So 10:15 is when we're going to wrap up. So you got 25, 30, 25.
And guys, if you could actually write things down. Don't just browse. Actually write down a couple ideas that made your farm successful. Actually write it down in that slot. And just raise your hand after you've gotten through your 3 to 5. Okay, that way I can see where everybody's at. Okay?
So again, that's page 106 in the book, and we want to say a big thank you to FeedWorks USA. They sponsored the book so that everybody would have one to take one home, and then when we wrap up the session, we'll tell you how you can buy some extras. But a special thank you to those fine folks who made sure that you each have that. And so go ahead, write down there on 106, that way you have that workbook to take home with you. All right, your 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning.
I'm going to make it 1 minute, every minute counts. So, okay, so guys, what did you, at your table here, folks, what did you guys write down for a couple values that made your farm successful that's got to continue for the next generation?
We did the value of 1. Every single customer, every single person that asks for, in our case, a value-added product is important. If you say you're going to deliver the cheese, deliver it. If you say you're going to get the online order ready, do it. And the value of 1, one-on-one relationships, my marriage, my children. I'm failing in some of my one-on-one extended family relationships on the farm. That's a confession.
That is genius. And I think that's really well thought through. I really appreciate that. Thanks for sharing with us. Who here had a value that they want to share? Not to pick on all you guys. Is anybody here? You sat in the wrong spot.
Great employees.
Great employees?
Yeah.
Okay, what else made your farm successful? What are the other values that made your farm successful?
The diversity, off farm income,
Okay.
and good bookkeeping.
Good bookkeeping? Okay. Say it again.
Buying in our replacements.
Okay, good. So what I'm looking at is what are core values that made your farm successful? Okay, I'm going to just, Ben?
I had faith, integrity, being able to forgive each other when you do have problems.
Okay. So having integrity. When you say that, the question is, do your partner understand what you mean? What, I mean, to clearly define that, something like sacrifice. I mean, that might mean one thing to you, might mean something totally different to your partner. And what's important is you get a phrase that everybody can understand. Like for this farmer just gave you as an example, the father was saying you got to earn respect, but the son didn't get it. It's important to have a conversation within the family so everybody's on the same page, so that for that one phrase, you're not speaking Spanish and they're understanding Portuguese. Right? So what's really important, the better the quality of the phrases and everybody understanding what that means, it's critical to the long-term farm success. So my other question is that what are 5 things that major farms has got to change in your farm? Because every generation things change. And a good example of that, there was a farm, and basically in 1952, the OPA came over from Holland. Do we have any good Dutchmen here? You're not in Ontario, I guess. But anyways, back in 1952, OPA came over from Holland. He had $400 in his shoe. And he basically built a $40 million farm. And back in 1985, he was able to build a barn without buying a nail. And he was able to grow when nobody else could because of his frugality. Basically, OPA, for the 30 years before that moment, had taken every nail and straightened it out, right? Frugality had made that farmer made the farm successful. But the grandson had come home to the farm, and him and OPA were best friends, but also worst enemies, because the grandson kept on getting frustrated. The OPA kept on pinching pennies and losing dollars. And so that was one of the values that we identified as the 5 things that make the farm's got to change in order to go to the next level. And for that farm, the thing that we changed, we came up with the resolution, we got to stop pinching pennies and focus on the dollars. OPA had me out to the farm, and to be frank with you, he thought it was a useless waste of an afternoon to have a consultant come out and come up with those 10 values. Right? Come the next Tuesday, the grandson was late to the farm. He had been meeting with a salesman. And so he called up OPA and said, okay, we got to get these guys started tearing apart that old shed. We're going to do an expansion. We're going to put a salvage pit there. And so OPA got the guy started. And he was just sitting on the tailgate. By that time, OPA was in his 80s and his body had given out. But it kind of had a grin on his face. He had the mason jar, and he had the employees straighten out the nails. Now, I know that would never happen near a farm, right? The grandson came and he was irritated. And he says, OPA, we got to stop pinching pennies and focus on the dollars. He says, I respect that we got here because of your frugality. But that guy there, he's 17 bucks an hour. That guy there is 22 bucks an hour. Now, we might save $5 in nails, but if we spend all day straightening out nails, how much are we going to lose as far as labor efficiency? The farm had changed gears. And for a second there, OPA was mad. But then he understood what his grandson meant, because they had that single line was a transparent communication between the two of them. And instead of driving out there mad and being angry at his grandson for 3 hours or 3 days, he respected how things had to change in the operation. And in order to go to the next level for every family farm, we've got to take a few things that are weaknesses and turn them into strengths. Even if they were something that made our farm successful in the past, it may be holding us back as far as a glass ceiling into the future. So my question to you folks is, what are a couple things that have got to change in your operation in order for the farm to succeed in the future? Okay, so just spend 2 minutes going through that list of things. Write down 5 things that got to change, right? I'll give you 2 minutes to do that. Okay. How much time do we got?
So you have 15 minutes total.
15 minutes
till your
total?
end, and then about another, I just started that for your 2 minutes, so.
Okay. Okay, I want this. sorry about that.
I was trying to see where Emily got to.
Oh, shucks.
Caroline. Where did Emily go? Emily? He was going to his
We're good,
next
we're
slide.
good now.
Okay,
I don't know how
there you go.
to. Okay. Oh, that's all I need, that's good. After I'm done speaking, you can go to the slide.
Okay.
When I'm concluding, okay. Okay, I think I encourage you guys to spend some time thinking about it, because the better the quality of the list, the better the results, okay, on long term in your farm. So my question is, Chad, what's one thing on your farm that made your farm successful that's got to change? What's one thing you got to improve on in order for your farm to be successful 10 years from now?
Communication and staying calm, cool, and collected.
You know, communication, that's such a silly, wishy-washy word until somebody throws a punch, right? Not that ever happens in your farm. It's really important to get that clearly defined. You know, and I think that the better clearly defined you can make that term, the better, easier it is. Like on some farms, the phrase might be, the right hand knows what the left hand's doing. You know, you say the word communication when you're in an argument with your brother, he's not going to understand what you mean. But you can ask him, does the right hand know what the left hand's doing and thinking? He's going to understand the shop, and that's going to be something that fixes the argument. You know, what I think is that it's great to come up with these phrases. I think you should go home, share this with your family. I really appreciate this farm credit. Who sponsored this, by the way?
But yes, we need to say a big thank you to Horizon Farm Credit. They sponsor.
I really do appreciate
And
that.
FeedWorks did the book.
Okay, so the thing is that it's really important that you go home. So for instance, this is it's great to come up with 10 things. Don't have it sitting inside of a book. Okay, get it 10 phrases, put it above the toilet, on every toilet on your farm. And the reason why, it needs to be above the toilet instead of beside the toilet, is because men need to be reminded of their goals more often than women. Okay? But the thing is, if it's sitting in a filing cabinet, it's absolutely useless. 2 weeks from now, we'll forget about it. And what I've actually found over the years is by, you know, getting it simply inside of a wallet. If you can see, I basically have these principles printed inside of a wallet, so that when you have a family business meeting, you can have these principles in front of you. And I had a farm family where dad basically was a family patriarch, very successful farm. But what dad was doing was going off, he'd ask his sons for input on decisions, but he'd go make those decisions on his own. And he was buying combines, and it got to the point that I got called out there when he bought a farm without talking to the boys, right? And the one decision we came up with, the one phrase was, nobody's smarter than the other guy. We make all decisions together. And for 6 months after, every time dad would go off and make a decision on his own, we would say, Dad, what's rule number 2? And it kept on coming. And the farm went, in that transition process, went from being my farm to our farm. And those boys have since then been able to double the farm size. Because instead of butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, everybody's on the same page. Everybody's pulling in the same direction. And this is just a simple example of these 10 commandments. You know, it's a simple example of a simple habit that you can change in your farm. And basically what I've done, like I said, I'm a mediator, but my life goal is to get rid of the need for a mediator. I designed a university course 5 years ago. We teach at Dordt College and a few other colleges. And basically what I did was get, you know, I'm tired of taking shotguns out of suicidal farmers' hands. And so I'm proud that I've been able to save farms in 22 states and 5 Canadian provinces. But, you know, nobody gets married expecting to get a divorce. Nobody goes home to farm with their family expecting there's going to be problems. The problem we have is we all think it's going to be happily ever after. And what we got to be is realistic to expect that we're going to be having problems. And we got to get really good at problem solving. And what I'm suggesting is that in this course that I started teaching at these colleges, I just simply got 10 habits like I just spoke to you about in a day-long course, and these kids started going home and implementing them. And so instead of butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions, they're on the same page and everybody's pulling the same direction. Anything you can do, this is key, anything you can do to improve the quality of decision making. Anything you can do to improve the quality of decision making. That's going to skyrocket the farm's profitability, and all that frustration of farming with family, all that butting heads is going to go by the wayside, and farming with family is fun again. And so I designed this initially for the kids going home from college as a transition from parent-child to professional working partnership. But what I found out as a side effect is that 80% of people taking the course online were actually farm families that were the sons and daughters in the 30s and 40s, and they've been there for 10, 15 years, and they have frustrations. Some very dire situations. And what I was surprised by a family adapting, taking the course and getting exposed to 10 different ideas and adapting 2 or 3 that can improve how they work together from good to great, it just resets how the family works together. It's amazing what you can do if you can stop being stubborn with each other and you can start being stubborn at the habits that make a farm and a farm family successful. Now, I want you to think about, don't listen to me, think about what you know before you walked in this room. You guys all know that farming is a game of economies of scale, right? So you give me a $40 million farm and you give me a $5 million farm. Okay, so let's say that the $40 million farm, they have a little bit of a competitive advantage as far as economies of scale, right? The thing is that, let's say the next 10 years in farming, hopefully it's all sunshine and unicorns is like what dairy prices are today, but with this COVID, who knows what it's going to be. And let's just assume that both farm families, they have the same amount of family members, they're both dairy farmers, all their neighbors would say that they're a good Christian farm family that run a tight ship. But the truth is, behind the barn, with both families, there's butting heads and pulling the farm in different directions. Now, let's say that the next 7 out of 10 years, dairy prices are terrible. And there's several years where the cost of production is higher than what you get paid. I got 3 different questions for you. The first question is, which family, let's say that the $40 million farm just continues doing what they're doing. They pretend to the neighbors that everything's perfect, but behind the barn, there's a different reality where everybody's butting heads and pulling the farm different directions. But the $5 million farm, they decide on the way home that they're going to change what they're doing and take a few bad habits and turn them into good habits, right? Now, let's just say the $40 million farm doesn't change, but the $5 million farm does. The $40 million farm continues to butt heads and pull the farm in different directions. The $5 million farm, they get on the same page, everybody's pulling in the same direction. Which farm is going to be able to make the decisions so that if their cost of production is higher than what they're getting paid, they're able to figure out how to survive? My second question is this, is that which farm is going to have a succession plan in 10 years' time? We all know that 77% of farms do not have a succession plan. The family where everybody's bickering over every decision and pulling the farm in different directions, or the family gets on the same page, everybody's pulling the same direction. The third question I got for you is this. Which farm do you want to work on for the next decade? Thank you.